Around 20 years ago, give or take a few years, John Dean was the pastor of Larchmont Baptist Church in the Larchmont section of Norfolk, and he knew he was getting close to retirement, and he also recognized that the community, the Larchmont community, was transitioning and that younger families were moving into the community.
None of us knows what the future is going to hold anyway. And we did not know what the future might be of the church. We knew that it had begun back in 1919 as an outreach from First Baptist Church downtown. And as the history of the thing indicates, they were reaching out to the far reaches of the city. Now we look at it as Larchmont just being a part of Norfolk. Then it was apparently more of a mission point.
In 1919 is when the church was born and founded, and I think those people really wanted to bring faith to this community and have a place that we have no parking lot. So everyone walked at that time to church. It was a neighborhood thing.
So we started kind of doing some Bible studies and outreach events with on the campus, and the result of that was that we started seeing students come to Christ. And as a result of that, we tried taking them to local churches that we were all a part of. But often what we would hear students say is, we don't really feel like there's a place for us in the church, that the church isn't really designed for us. And so they kind of often felt like they were, they just didn't know where they landed or where they fit within the local church.
We have to reach the younger generations. If there was not an outreach to them, churches generally could die and the cause of Christ not be set forward.
Eventually, there was a church planner named Mark Rion who had felt like God was calling him to plant a church at ODU. And so we met Mark, and he shared with us his vision for a campus church, and we thought, sounds pretty cool. Well, we're on board with that.
From the very beginning, when I was still in state work praying about starting a church, one of the things where we saw God move when we started this church was that I was in Richmond, and for 40 days I prayed and fasted about starting a church. And when I came here, I met through the university some professors, and we sat down, and they said, we have been praying and fasting earlier this year for a church to start here. And I said, when were you praying and fasting? They said the month of February, the exact same time that I was praying and fasting in Richmond, never having met one another, not knowing about one another. And that was one of the first signs we saw God already doing something miraculous.
What I think is so funny when you look back, so there were all these college students making up this church, which everybody sort of said was our weakness because nobody had any money. And they were, maybe not going to stay committed. But then, as God would have it, they would meet each other and get married, and this would become their home church. And then they'd meet each other and get married, and this became before you know it, they had children, they had friends. And so we could have never known at the time that that was the plan, that God had this great growth strategy that at the time everyone said was a foolish idea because everybody at the church was so young.
So when we got a call a few weeks before we were coming home after our 2-year journey in Venezuela, we knew we needed to come home for a little while. We didn't know what that would look like, and we didn't know when we would go back, but it was more of a question of when and not if. When we got the call that they were interested in Kevin for pastoring at CrossRoads for a few different reasons, that was really interesting, and we knew we had to go to the Lord immediately and see what God had for us, because coming back and pastoring a church plant that we knew was really difficult, that we loved, that we had been a part of for years, we'd seen the ups and downs even at that point, coming back and doing that at age 24 did not feel like something that we were equipped to do, even if that's where our passions were. So we really had to say, is this about us and what we're fully equipped to do, or is this about how God is always equipping us and He's calling us to live into something bigger than ourselves, and He wants to continue to grow us? We can't rely on ourselves.
To that extent, I think that if we were in the presence of the old timers back in 1919, they would say, well done. This is good that this transition has taken place as simply another step in the development of the kingdom of God on earth.
There were a couple of us that were just really impressed that God wanted us to be in this space, and that He was going to give us this church. And so we began to pray and just believe God for that.
I think now CrossRoads is there in that in the building, in the old Larchmont Church building, and they are, I believe, they're the answer to those prayers. They are that vision that John had of a young congregation ministering to the families in the Larchmont community.
We have to adjust to change. And if change doesn't take place, it will take place. You acted in a manner as CrossRoads Church to take over the structure at a timely time so that no ministry opportunity was lost. And we should not let any building or tradition stand in the way of the basic ministry of the church.
And so we get to be an incredible stepping stone in the journey of many people's lives. And now that we've been doing this for so long, it's really exciting to look back on people from 5 years ago or 10 years ago and to see the seeds of that were planted in people's lives through this church, through the community, of how God is still kind of reaping a harvest in their life, how He's still bearing fruit in their lives. And I think that is the reward, that is the joy that we have in ministry, is seeing how God is working in people and how He's working through people.